What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. Today we are talking drafts, but with a guest. I have got Praz on, who some of you may know from Twitter. Also does lots of videos for Fantasy Football Scout as well. If you want to follow him, all the links and stuff will be in the description below. We're very happy to have him on. Praz, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Andy. It's an absolute bucket list moment to be on here with you. So thank you for having me, and very excited that FPL is back.
Yeah, it should be good. I think, how much work do you put in this early on? Are you constantly tinkering? Are you constantly researching, or do you kind of take a bit more of a laid back approach?
Constantly researching, tinkering, not so much. I think once I've settled on something, now it's more about gathering information, preseason, pricing, new transfers, and things like that. So I wouldn't really go back into the FPL website and keep changing constantly. It's more about now, who are the gems to pick and who are the dilemmas that I need to solve.
Yeah, I kind of do the same. If there's a bit of research or I do some reading or something, and I think, okay, I probably do want that player, I might go and put them in, but I'm not constantly thinking about different structures and stuff like that. Because I think people just confuse themselves when they do that, and they forget about why they originally picked players. But yeah, we're going to jump into the draft in just a second. Praz does it's a weekly video, right, on Fantasy Football Scout, burning questions, really good. There'll probably be some pre-season, definitely through the season as well. So make sure to check that out. I'll put the links to that in the description below. And in case you need any convincing, I have got your last 10 years rank history on the screen. So in the last 3 years, two top 10Ks. Two top 10Ks in the last 4 years, and 11.5 finished last year. I was reading it upside down, but pretty decent, right? Never outside the top 100K in the last 10 years.
Yeah, look, I'm just a consistent manager who makes good decisions every week, and I wouldn't call myself boring or maverick. I just kind of take every week, and if you're disciplined enough, I think 100K is the benchmark. If you have a good season, then the top 10Ks just come, right? So I'm happy to have had 4 of them, and that's the goal again, and we'll see if we get there.
Yeah, exactly. I've got our last season's ranks on screen just in case you wonder what they were. We haven't started early. All right, so the basis of this conversation is basically going to be around the draft, the key talking points and stuff like that. I'll do all the caveats right now. We know this is early. We know nothing is locked in. Things could obviously change. But I think given that there's a lot of players here that are in a lot of people's drafts, it's going to be good to talk about them. So we might keep it broad in sections. So one thing obviously noticed straight away, it is a 5 at the back formation, which is extremely popular right now. I've said on previous videos, it's often popular right at the start, and then people switch to 3 at the back. I don't think that's going to happen this year. How kind of locked into you are that, or locked in are you to that? Because obviously the biggest thing I think about 5 at the back is you don't get that 4.5 million bench defender. Yeah, because we know that they are more valuable than any other 4.5 million position unless something crazy happens. So how kind of locked in-ish are you to that 5 at the back?
I am fairly locked into a 4 premium defense structure. So, I think we've said this enough that there is value in the Trents, Robertson, Cancelos, and the Chelsea guys, and Perisic. So I will definitely have 4 of them, if not 5. And the 5th one, I'm even okay to go for a 4.5 starting. So even then, I would be okay with the 5 at the back. So I see value in 4.5 defenders like Tomiyasu, Johnny, the Leicester boys. So I don't really mind it. I don't think changing to a 4.5 will change my views on the formation. The way it's been structured is either you're going heavy at the back and you have one maybe price point in the middle at 8.0, or you have a few of them, because at 8.0 in midfield, there's so many good options that you have to compromise one or the other. So to answer your question, I think I will pretty much quite certainly remain 4 or 5 at the back.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to do the same. I think 4 at the back just looks so good. I mean, in terms of particular players you've picked, I was looking into Perisic. I know it's come up a lot on Twitter as well, that last year started a lot of games, made it past 60 minutes a lot. The year before under Conte, not so much. And obviously he is now another year older, although last year showed that he is a bit of a machine. Do you have any concerns this early on about his kind of game time, how many times he might get subbed and stuff like that? Or do you just think the price is just too good to turn down?
Price is too good, and I've also tried to break up the season, right? Because we have only a 16-game week mini game. And then within that, we have a wild card. So if you break it up and say first 4 game weeks, there's no midweek games for Spurs, and for the big 6 in any case. So you would think that they're trying to get the rhythm, and the big players should just continue to play. And this applies to even the big hitters up front, which we'll come to. But for Perisic, I think the first 3-4 game weeks, and I know one of them is Chelsea, I think he'll be good. And then you sort of take the call then after 4 weeks if he's one to keep or not.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. Sometimes I think about players. Like I do a lot of price predictions, right? Like I'm sure a lot of people do before the game comes out. And I overpriced a lot of players, I'll be honest. But I really thought he was going to be a £6 million defender. So when he came in at 5.5, that straight away said to me that he probably is a pretty decent like value pick. So that's kind of why I'm like a lot of people so high on him. And he's almost like, for players like that, I almost think I'd rather be on him and it fail than not be on him and he just smashes it. Because I think he got like 15 returns or something last year, just attacking ones without even clean sheets. Let's talk about Chelsea. They also came in at 6 million. Again, a price which I thought was actually quite cheap. I thought they could have at least been 6.5. There's quite a little bit of worry from some people that they've lost Rudiger. I think Azpilicueta is probably going as well. There's lots of rumours about him going to Barcelona maybe. They could switch to 4 at the back, and obviously a lot of these questions will be answered during pre-season. But does a switch to 4 at the back put you off in any way?
It does put me off, and it puts me off to the extent that I only have one of them. I mean, I would ideally like both James and Chilwell. So the fact that I'm a little bit skeptical is why I've gone Perisic instead of a James, because I think double up or even a triple up, which with Mendy is slightly overcommitting at this stage. They are in flux. They are going to buy, Nathan Ake, I think, is pretty close. They may buy another central defender. We don't know if they move to a 5 at the back or not. Now, the caveat is, even if they move to a 4 at the back, Liverpool are 4 at the back, Man City are 4 at the back, they're still defensively solid. So we sort of create a narrative. If they move from 4 to 5, suddenly, from 5 to 4, suddenly they'll be defensively weak. Of course, they've lost Rudiger. This may be partly true, but it's not like they will stop being the top 4 defense, right? So it's a good team to back anyway.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same opinion. I think you could find a situation, especially early on, where they do take a little bit of time to adjust, and maybe we could be on a little bit early, and like later on they'll figure it out. But that's my thinking as well. It's not like, Trent's the best defender in FPL, and he's not a wing back, right? He might play like one, but that's not how he lines up. So I kind of think the same. I think if he does move to 4 at the back, like that will be compensated for elsewhere. It'll have to be, right? Have you got any kind of strong opinions this early on about James versus Chilwell?
If both Alonso and Azpilicueta leave, then I think it's pretty much 50-50. If only one of them leaves, I think that creates the space for the other. At the moment, I would just be a little bit more inclined towards Chilwell, simply because he's coming back. He's, I guess you can say there's injury. Has he recovered enough? But I think that left side is his own, right? There's nobody else who competes with him on that left.
Yeah, and I also think I know we can create a narrative around this for a lot of players, but I think what happened in the Euros, where Luke Shaw basically took that left back spot, and I don't think Chilwell played a single minute. I don't think he even came on, from what I remember. I think a lot of people will be thinking that's his to gain back now, because obviously Luke Shaw was so bad last season, like Man United were in general. So that is probably going to play into his mind a little bit. Obviously, he'll want to stay fit, but that is something that's crossed my mind. Like it's his place to win back if he has a pretty good start to the season. So yeah, I kind of like Chill. Ideally, I want both, but like, there's so many good defenders. It's so difficult to fit in. All right, let's skip defense. We'll come back to the goalkeeper in a minute, because I want to talk about that 5.5. Let's talk about the premiums. I'm going to guess Salah's locked in no matter what.
100%.
Yeah, so we'll skip over that. Everyone knows Salah's great. What about Haaland? How are you feeling about him? Because I'll be honest, I spoke about him early on, like he was definitely going to be in my draft. I'm pretty sure he probably will be by game week 1. But I do have some doubts, right? You know what you're going to get with Kane or Son. You just don't know that with Haaland. Or do you think it's just too much to miss out on?
Too explosive. I mean, there's this saying where you don't want to lose the FPL season early on. I mean, this guy's going to be 60-70% owned, explosive in a Man City team. I mean, how can you miss out? And Bournemouth is the captainable fixture, which is game week 2. So, and that's the point when Kane and Son play Chelsea. So you might as well say, look, I'm going to commit to Haaland for 2 weeks, see how it goes, and then I'll switch if it doesn't work out, rather than I'm going to punt on a Son or a Kane. And one of those fixtures is, I think it's away to Chelsea. So I just wouldn't go there, even though long term I see myself maybe having a Son or Kane ahead of a Haaland if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think it's almost annoying because it kind of dictates the answer for you. But I think that Bournemouth fixture is what's really putting me off trying something different. If Kane had a very similar fixture in game week 2 and not Chelsea, I really could see me starting with him because I think, yes, he started off super slow last year, but I think there was a lot going on there. Right? It wasn't Conte in charge for one thing. The Man City, obviously, really wanted to go. And I know a lot of people thought they would just have a bad season all along, but he didn't. Once that was cleared up, and then when Conte was in, he was obviously brilliant. So there's something about me wanting to switch from Kane to Haaland game week 2. But do you think that's just too early to be banking in the transfer?
I think it's too early. I mean, there'll be other things that come up. I mean, we never get the first draft right, or the first game week 1 team right? Something will go missing, whether that's a team that looks poor, maybe that's an Arsenal, or maybe the Chelsea defense is looking suspect. We'll want to change things. And the other thing, a macro point is, so many of these players are so highly owned that it's going to take one blank for us to see price drop. So I know people don't all care about price, but what it creates is panic in our minds that I need to be doing something. I need to be doing something if Chilwell is dropping and a Perisic is rising. And so that's the kind of thing that you want to have flexibility if you don't have this Kane to Haaland transfer pre-committed.
Wait to see what happens when everybody goes Haaland and Kane gets a hat-trick against Southampton. And imagine if Haaland doesn't start or something. Because in the past, Pep does kind of integrate his players slowly enough. They don't all necessarily get straight in. And sometimes you find the player actually is better in the second season. For what it's worth, I don't think that's going to be the case with Haaland. I just think he's too big of a signing to do that. And obviously, they will maybe have to change their style of play a little bit to fit him in. So they'll want to do that early on. But just imagine if he doesn't start or if he blanks and Kane gets a hat-trick and then game week 2, there'll be so much panic about making that change. But I guess the fixtures will probably put people off there.
And a couple of things on that. I mean, there's obviously the Community Shield the week before, and that's a tough Liverpool game, right? So let's say Haaland plays and blanks or gets a sub off in 65. It'll even create this panic before the deadline. And then the other thing about Haaland I wanted to mention is, remember how he started at Dortmund? I know different team, different league, but he does have this knack of really kind of coming in and scoring. I think he scored 8 in 8 or something. And the other, and the other thing is Grealish started, I think, the first 8 games for City last year. So yes, Pep has this thing of first season bedding in, but you can also see the Grealish example and say maybe Haaland gets all the games until the Champions League starts minimum.
Yeah, I really think he will, to be honest. The Community Shield, I think, will be a good test. You can't put too much emphasis on it because I think last year I had Mahrez, not just because of the Community Shield, but it probably did help keep him in the team. And then he just didn't play any minutes, I think, from what I remember near the start. He did come on and get a goal at one point, but yeah, I think it'll be different with Haaland. Let's talk about Arsenal. So in my first draft, I had Saka. I'm fairly sure I'm going to switch to Jesus as well. What's your reasoning for having him straight in?
Penalties, playing up top, who's somebody who's not Lacazette. I mean, you saw Nketiah. I mean, he did so well for you at the end of last season. If you have a striker with an eye for goal, they're not really, it wasn't the Firmino role. So we originally thought that the way Lacazette is playing is the Firmino role, and he's basically bringing in Martinelli and Saka. So we all owned Martinelli and Saka, or we all owned Saka last season. But I think their shape is not exactly like that. And Jesus, if he's central, if he stays in those positions, yes, he's a hard worker, he's a presser, he will get the goal. So I think he has a lot to prove. The narratives are there. And Arteta loves him. He's going to start pretty much. I think Nketiah will be the Europa League guy. He'll be the Premier League guy. Great value, right? I mean, I was thinking, coming back to what you were saying, I was thinking he's going to come in 8.5 and 9 and still would have been good value. So, yeah, with those fixtures, I think I definitely prefer him.
Yeah, I thought he was going to come in at 8.5, which is slightly more than Saka, just because they always have this thing where they seem to always overprice forwards compared to midfielders. But I saw some people saying 9.5, which I thought was a little bit crazy, but I could also see it as well because his underlying numbers are always really good, and I know he's got this. Kind of people talk about him as a really bad finisher, but I think his numbers are so high, you can kind of compensate a little bit for that by not being the greatest finisher. And I think again, I've seen people say stuff like, he's not going to get as many tap-ins as he did at Man City, but I actually think his movement and stuff like that is going to be ideal for Arsenal. And like you said, he's going to be pretty much nailed on. The only thing I do wonder about the penalty situation, I kind of assume that he will get them as well, but his penalty record's not great. I think I just looked at it really quickly there. He's since, I think, 2017-18, he's missed 7 and scored 5. So he's missed more than he's scored. So, but I know why you're saying that, because who else is going to take him, right? Saka took a couple, then Martinelli took one. I don't know if they've got someone else that's going to take them week in, week out. So I think he'll be given them to start with, and then
see how he does
his to lose maybe, yeah.
I just generally think, let's see the narrative of the transfer, right? He's left a Champions League club, comes to a club in the Europa League, and he was the assistant manager when Pep was in charge, when Jesus was bought. Clearly, it's a case of Arteta saying, look, I'm going to revive you. I'm going to get you up there as the striker where you belong. And so you can have the pens, you can have, the 90 minutes or majority of the minutes. The story fits. And then the guy he's good. I mean, you only get missed chances if you're actually in the box and you're there to take those chances. So, yeah.
Is there any part of you that would switch to Saka, or do you think it's done? It's Jesus?
No, it could switch. So if I am struggling with the 8 million midfielder price point, I know we will come to it. I really think my final draft will have one midfielder who is 8 million. Just because that is the space where there'll be bandwagons. I can just see it. I'll say it now. There's Maddison, Kulusevski, Diaz, Foden, Mahrez, Saka. The list is endless in pretty much every club. So one of these guys is going to score a brace. Game week 1, game week 2, and that's going to be somebody who you can jump on as a bandwagon. I don't want to miss out on that and be 2 to 3 transfers away. So I think I'll keep Jesus, but how this structure will evolve is maybe I'll try to fit in another 8 million midfielder.
What are you struggling with them right now? Just pinpointing who's the best one, because like you said, there are quite a few, or is it something else?
No, it is something else. Well, there's quite a few, but within that there's some nuances. So first, with Luis Diaz, the issue is obviously Robertson, right? I mean, who is the best third Liverpool? So I think Diaz could be the best 8 million, but then Robertson is also, for me, a top 3 defender. So who are you sacrificing there? Number 2, with Man City, you just never know. Even though Sterling is sold, Jesus is sold, it would appear that Mahrez gets the minutes, but he's never been the guy who's trusted by Pep to play 90 minutes or 2,500 minutes a season. So what does that mean? Does Foden move there? Will they share minutes? So I like all of them, but I'm not super confident in any of them, if that makes sense. I mean, Saka would have been the one, but now it's Jesus. So yeah, that's where I'm not really convinced yet. Kulusevski, I don't know what happens once Richarlison is in the system. Does he take over on the right? Does he share minutes? It's a little bit of a question mark.
Yeah, I think like for Man City, I completely agree. I don't think it's as straightforward as like everyone's saying that. Jesus isn't there, so he can't play right wing. Sterling will be gone, so he's not going to play right wing, so therefore it's Mahrez. But, I mean, the first game could literally be Grealish on the left, Haaland up front, and Foden on the right. There's no reason why Foden can't play on that side as well. We know how much Pep likes Foden anyway. Like, he does usually fit him in most of the time when he's fit. At least last season, not necessarily towards the end, I don't think, but for a lot of it, he's usually, when there's not Champions League and stuff. So yeah, I don't think it's that straightforward either. The most interesting one for me, because I think Saka, you know what you're going to get already. He's going to start every game. He's pretty consistent. Again, you can make that argument that Jesus is better. That's fair enough. But if we're just looking at midfielders, Saka's got to be right up there. Kulusevski is the one I'm most kind of unsure but also interested in at the same time, because he was so good last year. I think 8 million is perfectly fine for the numbers he was outputting. I just don't know what's going on with Richarlison, because he's only ever played over the last few seasons left or central. Like, he doesn't really play off the right, so I don't know if that's where... I mean, I think he's just been brought in as a squad player, and I think even, players obviously want game time, but I think if you get the chance to move from Everton, who just fought for relegation, to Spurs with Conte... Yeah. You make that move and hope that, maybe not hope, but you know what I mean, like an injury or something happens where you get a run of games. So I think he's a squad player. Yes. But again, I guess pre-season will give us more of an indication about kind of Kulusevski's.
And he's banned for the first game, so it's not like we'll get clues immediately. It's just he's such a sulky player as well, right? He's gonna be in. You can just see it. He'll be in Conte's ear to get minutes. Whether he takes them off Son, Kane, or Kulusevski, we just don't know. I'm just thinking either you go Son, Kane. Kulusevski doesn't cover those guys anyway. And I felt that, I owned Kulusevski pretty much every game week since game week 29. So I really enjoyed all of his points. I just felt a lot of them were fortuitous points. I mean, passing to Son outside the box and then he scores a worldie or something like that. Look, he's a great player. He's made the system work a lot better. But I just think, a Maddison, for example, a lot of appeal there. I still would probably go for a City guy if I see something. And the main thesis of that is, as you'll see in this draft, 10 players in the team are from the top 5 teams in the league last season. That's because we have a unique situation where these are the teams that have the best fixtures. These are the teams that are the best by definition from last season. So I'm trying not to veer too far away from that. I know Kulusevski ticks that, but that's why I'm sort of not leaning towards Maddison or a Vardy type of draft.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I almost wish that some of the top teams had much worse fixtures and some of the lower teams had better fixtures, just to give us something not more interesting to talk about, but just a little bit different, because the Liverpool fixtures, the Chelsea fixtures, Spurs fixtures, and Man City are all so good, it's hard to kind of look past them. But there is one spot in your team where you haven't got one of those players in the top teams, which is Neto. Massive bandwagon so far for 5.5 million midfielders. Obviously, again, pre-season might show us that there's a better option and stuff like that. Is that a player that right now you're happy enough with, or is it someone that you would ideally like to change, i.e. probably upgrade at some point? Like, I guess between him and Martinelli, if you can upgrade one of them to the 8 million, who's more likely to go at this point?
I think it might be Martinelli, actually. So not to say that I love Neto, but look, it's a fixtures play, right? I mean, there is a dearth of options under the 7 million or even 8 million bracket in midfield. You don't have a lot until the Man United boys start to show up, which is hopefully Rashford or Sancho do that. But when you go down, there's not a lot. So if you say, I don't know when I'm going to wildcard, but if it is between week 6 to 8, then I'm going to go for the team that is top of the ticker, which is Wolves for the first 6 game weeks. Go for Neto, because he has been involved in goals for Wolves. I know they don't score a lot, but what are you expecting from a 5.5? So it's almost like he is the sacrifice that needs to be made to afford the rest of the team, not a pick that I have sort of have any conviction with. But at 5.5, it's between him and Wissa, the Brentford guy. And they just have better fixtures. And I don't know how Brentford will do in their second season without Eriksen. So I'm generally a little bit more skeptical. But I think for now, it's Neto, open to changing that if another bandwagon emerges.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you just made. Not necessarily about Neto and the fixtures and stuff, because I mean that is all good points. But the thing for me is the enabler point, because when I put my drafts up a lot, people always focus on the weak link as if that's the player that's going to make or break your season. They don't focus on the fact you've got Haaland, you've got Salah, you've got Jesus, you've got 5 great defenders, you've even got a Man City goalkeeper, which we are going to talk about in a sec. So yeah, okay, if Neto fails, if Neto doesn't score any points in the first 6 weeks other than appearance points, that's probably not going to be the thing that means you don't get a top 10k or a top 20k for the rest of the season. It is just an enabler. And I always try and make that point to people that he is just slotting in to fit the rest of the team. So it's just, the question is not whether there's better players than him, it's whether there's better players at 5.5 million. That's the only thing that matters. Obviously, if for whatever reason, Robertson gets injured or something and suddenly you've got a lot of money in defence, or Trent, Cancelo, whoever, you got the money to upgrade, then it's a different conversation, right? It is that £8 million midfielder. But I think people get too hung up on their weakest links. Like, I don't even necessarily agree that they should be where we focus the transfers on either, because they're not going to get us the big point. I don't think Wissa or Anthony Gordon or Damari Gray or anyone like that, as always in FPL, right, they might go on a run at the start of the season. You'll wish you would have been on it, but it's hard to predict that. So yeah, I kind of agree. I think, if the season had to start tomorrow, I think Neto would probably be in my team, but I'm like you, I'm open to be convinced otherwise over pre-season, and he might be that player that we all talk about early on that just isn't in any game week 1 drafts. But yeah, the point about what he doesn't really matter to a certain extent. I fully agree with that. Let's talk about the goalkeeper. So there was a lot of love for goalkeepers this year because the prices have come down. Obviously, you can get a Man City goalkeeper now for 5.5, a Liverpool goalie for 5.5. How likely do you think you are to stick with that? Because obviously you are already talking about probably early wildcard probably is going to happen in game week 6 or 8. Is that making you more likely to go for him, or is there other reasons?
No, it is more likely. Now, people talk about goalkeepers and say over the season, one keeper will score 170, the other will 150. So why are you paying $1 million more or something like that? Or the ceiling or the save potential. I think this year, what we have is the 4.5s are decent. I think Raya is decent. Sanchez is decent. The 5 million bracket with Mendy is amazing if we can get some comfort from Chelsea. But the 5.5, so a lot of people are looking at Alisson. I am not looking at Alisson at all because I want to keep my option open in case, Nunez scores a brace or Robertson scores a 15-pointer. I don't want to be locked out. That's not really the case with Man City, where that third option outside Cancelo and Haaland doesn't exist today. This may change over Community Shield or something else where Mahrez emerges. But for now, if I want a third City player, I think at 5.5, he's basically the Laporte price, or cheaper than Laporte. So yes, Laporte has some goal threat, but I'm happy with an Edison if I can afford it in the team structure. Having said that, if I want to upgrade a Martinelli to an 8 million midfielder, where will I pull funds from? The goalkeeper is the first spot. So if you were to ask me, will I end up with Edison? I think there's a low likelihood that I do unless anything changes, but I like it. I think they've priced the keepers well this year.
Yeah, I think that is there is a big difference between Man City and Liverpool for FPL. Like, we know they're going to be the two teams that score the most goals, but there's only one of those teams pretty much right now where you can almost guarantee 3 to 4 players are going to get a lot of minutes, and it's not Man City. I'm sure Cancelo will, and I'm sure Haaland will, but I agree, you don't feel quite as bad if you lock yourself out of that third Man City player, so I kind of get it. Again, there's probably going to be downgrades at some point. Like you said, you might get in that 4.5 million defender that will give you extra money to spend elsewhere. How happy would you be going in with that bench, or do you think that's something that needs work? Because Andreas Pereira, if he moves to Fulham, should play. I don't know about any of the other guys, whether they're going to get too many minutes. So do you worry about not having that bench player to come on?
I think it's a case like we talked about Neto. I think people worry too much about their bench, especially early season. So without Champions League, without injuries, people are having a full preseason after a long time. I think you can sort of bank on the team to play. And then you add the 5 subs rule, where even if your guy doesn't start, there's a much more likelihood that he cameos. So you don't need the bench at all. So I go back to a popular example where, let's say in the first 8 game weeks, you have 88 players, right? 11 on the pitch. So 88 players that actually get you points. How many times do we expect a first sub to come in? Three game weeks, maybe? So 85 of your players should be the ones that are the 11, and the 3 or maybe 4 will be the first bench, or maybe the second bench if you're really unlucky. So my philosophy is, let's not worry about the 4 players. Let's worry about the 84 in my first 8 game weeks. And that's why I sort of try to skimp on it initially. We don't have the budget. It's only 100 million. As team value grows, my bench gets better, but I think I was very happy when Pereira moved. That gives me hopefully, let's see preseason, but a solid first bench. I don't need anybody else. If anybody else can give me a 1-pointer, 2-pointer in an emergency, that's enough. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm very big on expected data, right, and optimal teams and stuff like that. And every time you look at them, they've always got this big bench. It doesn't matter how much I get into stats, I just cannot have that big bench. I just do not like playing FPL like that. And even during peak COVID seasons over the last couple of years, I never necessarily had 3 playing players on the bench. So I think the most I will probably do, in addition to probably Andreas Pereira, if he's going to be a regular starter, which it looks like he might be, is just try and get that 4.5 million defender, and that is it. I'm not going to worry about any more money outside of that, unless we get a crazy situation where, like last year, where obviously, again, I mentioned him a few times, but Robertson got injured, suddenly Tsimikas is 4 million. That was a bit ridiculous. I don't think we'll see that this year, but yeah, that's the only reason I would think. So I'm kind of with you. I like the cheap bench. If I can get good players on there, like Nico Williams, right? A lot of people are going to talk about him, £4 million bench player. That's fine. I'm happy to have playing players, but I don't want much money on there at all.
Correct. Cool. I mean, Nico Williams, just a word on that. I think there's so many good options in 4.5. I don't see why people would go for a Nico Williams, even though he has attacking threat. I know there's other discussions to be had on cheap defenders, but I mean, we've got so many Arsenal defenders at 4.5. We don't have to get a Nottingham Forest defender for 4. It's a bit like Brandon Williams from last season, right?
Yeah, I do tend to agree. I think it would kind of depend on the rest of the squad set. If I didn't think I was going to need that player very often, I probably would. If I thought I was going to rotate him in a bit more, then yeah, I do like Arsenal. The team I really like, we finish up in a second, but the team I really like is Leicester. I say I'm intrigued by them, right? No Europe. They had a lot of injuries last year. They're not as bad as they were last year in defence. And I think for 4.5 million, there could be some bargains there. Whether or not I'd start the season with them, I don't know, because Arsenal's fixtures are so good. Tomiyasu just kind of stands out. But I am very intrigued by like Ricardo Pereira, Castagna, James Justin as well. And I know straight away I've just named 3 fullbacks, right? And they've only played with 2. So I know there's issues there. But I think we could, like Castagna, for example, I think will get quite regular minutes. So, again, I'll see how it plays out. But I agree. There's too many interesting players at 4.5. I think it would just, unless there was like a big upgrade where I needed 0.5, I'd probably agree with you. I wouldn't necessarily have that Nico Williams spot. I think we will leave it there. I will say thank you very much for joining me. Very interesting. Loads of good points made. And obviously wish you the best for the rest of the season. Or the rest of pre-season, then the start of the season. We've got a long way to go yet.
Yeah, no, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. And this has been great to kind of talk out the first draft. We'll see how it evolves.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get you on at some point. Like I said, make sure you follow Praz. The Twitter handle is on screen. I'll put links in the description below as well. It also does those videos on Fantasy Football Scouts, so make sure to check them out. If you enjoyed this one, give it a like. If you want to see more guests, hit subscribe if you're new around here, and we'll catch you again soon.